The goal of Neon Cyber is, we always say protect the people that power your business, right? That's the mantra, and it's pretty simple, right? We want to sit with the user. We want to provide the safeguards for the user as they interact with the outside world, and we want to be able to ensure that security teams have complete control, over a security event that could go on there.
Here we are. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to LoopStudioTalks. Today, episode number 7 and it's honestly a special one for us. We have someone here who is not just an industry partner, but truly a friend of Loop Studio. I'm talking about Mark St. John, co-founder of Neon Cyber. Many of you know his work, but we have had the pleasure of knowing Mark since his time at AlphaWave, which is where we first connected. Mark has been in cybersecurity trenches since, and he told me this himself, the late 90s. This is someone who has led major threat intelligence and AR teams at massive places like Verizon. What I think makes Mark so special is his mission. Mark, seriously, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. So welcome, Mark.
Yeah. Glad we're doing it. Glad we're chit-chatting.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all that info.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mark, your career is quite impressive. You have been in tech and security your whole career, in the trenches as an executive and builder, innovator, a lot of names. How did you start in tech? What's the backstory?
Well, I started working on computers when I was a kid. My father was a programmer, and so I had access to a computer from the time I was 8. This was in the 80s, and there wasn't a lot going on computer-wise. There's no internet. Got my start with BBSs and just learning a lot and being embedded in technology at an early age, and really wanting to. I lived in a small town in Texas where there was not a lot of other computer people, so the concept of finding a community who were like-minded and interested in computers like I was really sort of put me on the way. And then I started working for an ISP in the early 90s, which is really where I got learned about what security was outside of just, things break or there's viruses and things like that. And that was a mix of helping end users get connected to the internet for the first time. This is in dial-up. People didn't know what TCP/IP was, and you're having to install packages for them. And then you got to slowly start to see the advent of the internet. And as soon as consumers started accessing the internet, you started to see scams. Phishing goes back to the 90s. And then further on in my career, you started to see, people leaving computers exposed to the internet. Back then, it was website defacements and denial of service attacks. It wasn't any of the sexy things that we have now where attackers are making a ton of money. It was a lot of vandalism. And then my first sort of job was at a managed hosting provider here in Texas, who had a very small security team. At that time, security was rudimentary border controls. It was firewalls and access lists and routers. And then, customers started seeing vandalization, and that started to really escalate. And I had a little bit of a background into it. And so I just made my way in while working as one of the tech support administrators. We had some incidents that were at the time cataclysmic, but now, looking back, you kind of laugh at what they were. But I just threw my hat in the ring and said, hey, I'm interested in this. I'll help fix it. And I became an incident response janitor, right, for lack of a better term. And then getting to see the move from, people just wanting to compromise web servers to host pirated files and do, vandalism, defacement, to the genesis of ransomware, where it really started to escalate in the 2000s. And that's when the whole thing shifted, right? That's when it went to a financially driven model. That's when attackers went from being just sort of nuisances to, weaponized nation state or criminal orgs. And now we live in an asymmetrical warfare world where defenders don't have the resources that attackers have. It accelerated really quickly, and it's an incredible industry to be in. I'm always looking out for the underdog because I've seen the impacts that it has on our personal lives, and I've seen the impacts that it has on businesses of all sizes, trying to stay ahead of the curve, and what one data breach or what one incident, even the downtime costs from it, how much that can impact organizations and people. And that really keeps me going, keeps me interested. And also, it's an industry that, quite frankly, if you're into it, you cannot be bored because every day there is some fresh new devious plot to undermine security systems and people. And, now we've got even more social engineering than before. So the human element is really starting to shine. And so, yeah, and it's been a long, long time since the 90s. A lot of things have changed, but the fundamentals are still there, right? Still helping people understand basic hygiene of protecting their users and their infrastructure.
That's awesome. But also, if we talk about the industry, it's a quite new industry. We're not talking like more than 20, 30 years.
Yeah. It's, I don't want to say it's in its infancy because, it's bazillions of dollars and every vendor does it. But the problems, like I said, the problems are still the same. We're still trying to solve, initial access. We still have to solve incident response, like these things that are continual programs that have become part of the daily conversation, feed into this ecosystem that's now the industrialized cybersecurity. And it is crazy to think that there has been all this growth, but it's still a small, tight-knit community. We all have our concentric circles where we're quick to meet people and introduce people, and then you find out that you're relative to a lot of people, and it's fun. There's still a long ways to go, and with the changes that AI is bringing in, for better or for worse, we are about to have another sort of genesis, if you will, another huge evolution, which I'm excited for. AI as a technology enjoyer and a futurist. I'm not excited about AI as a person who wants to help people protect their data.
Yeah, that's quite good one. But let's go a little bit to 2010. You branched out of the corporate world and founded AlphaWare with Cody Pierce.
Mm-hmm.
You took a big risk there. What happened that convinced you it was the right time to make that move?
So in 2019, Cody and I were sitting at my kitchen table. He, at the time, lived in Austin. We've been close friends since we were teenagers. And he has spent the majority of his career in offensive security, exploit development, vulnerability research, things that I've spent my life defending. And, his viewpoint of the way attackers operate and my viewpoint of how to defend and stay afloat against that type of stuff. We found kind of a common ground that people hadn't really been focusing on, and it was attack surface management, which has become its own cottage industry. It's morphed into exposure management, which is great, but we wanted to find a way to help automate people understanding what they look like to an attacker, what they look like to the outside world. There's always been inventory, and inventory management has always been a challenge for organizations of any size, be it 10 people or 10,000 people. And once you start exposing things to the internet, 2019 was the peak of the adoption of cloud infrastructure and, all of the different microservices and services that you can just deploy in seconds. And developers are able to spin up, testing environments to the public internet with databases. Like this whole concept just was really leaving a lot of things exposed. So we wanted to automate that for people. So we got in and built AlphaWave, and its only goal was to repeatably show people what little cracks, what little target of opportunity attackers could take within their environment and how they can and bring those back in. And it's wonderful that was a great experience. It's where we met you guys. That's where our relationship with Loop Studio started, and getting to grow that out. And then now getting to look back and see that that's become a standard part of a lot of people's operation center, right? Is the proactive discovery of assets, staying as aggressive as possible on discovering the little bits of hygiene. It's nice to see. And so we jumped in there. And we went on, we were acquired by Looking Glass and then Zero Fox, and then getting to help larger organizations, going from 2 people to 50 people, and then to, the 1,000 people that were Zero Fox, and helping educate and grow where we could with inside of those product teams and those organizations was really a great journey for us. Getting not just to spread the gospel of attack surface management, but from a selfish standpoint, getting to see, what huge go-to-market teams look like, what things that as a technology person, you don't sit with product managers, you don't sit with product marketing managers a lot. And so jumping into that would open my eyes a lot, I should say, as to what it takes to actually not just build a good product and platform, but how to make sure that you message it out correctly and get it in the hands of the right people.
That's incredible. You mentioned that you get acquired by Looking Glass at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like to go through selling your company?
Boy, it's a mixed bag. Right. Mostly all positive. The Looking Glass people were terrific. And a lot of the people that we met from working inside Looking Glass are people that we still work with now or talk to It was a good company. I'm staying with ZeroFox. The first thing is when you give up control of your idea, when you have to accept that roadmaps and target audiences can shift very quickly. And it's still within some of your control from an advisory standpoint, but you have to, I don't want to say submit to the larger organization, but you have to take all of those inputs in and start to measure them out and not be defensive about it and not be reactive when you hear something, because it's just as much, when you're brought into an organization, you're as much coaching and informing them about what you were doing and why it was important, and also listening to and trying to learn their customers and their approach to servicing customers and who it fit best with. So that was a good quality culture shock. The other one is just giving up complete control of a company. Now, when we had started Alpha Wave, it was during COVID. I do not recommend that anybody starts a startup right in the middle of a global pandemic. That brings its own sort of anxiety and challenges, but we weathered through that pretty well. And so there was that, there's always the oddities and the what ifs that go on when you look back and think about this one-time cataclysmic event that's going on across the world. And I'm worried about my, software. So that was that. It overall very positive. I would absolutely do it again. I would follow a lot of the same steps that we did, and it was, other than it's very satisfying to know that other people want to see your product and your technology and your approaches adopted. It is a challenge sometimes to let go of it though.
That's crazy, because in just 2 years, AlphaWay got acquired, and almost 2 years after that, Looking Glass got acquired. What can you tell us about those times? Acquisitions are times of a lot of changes, not just your job and your responsibility, but the whole working culture. What learnings can you share about these transactions?
So Looking Glass was about 50 people. Then we were acquired by ZeroFox. ZeroFox is a very sizable machine. They specialize in digital risk protection, very established. They've been around for 13, 14 years. There was already some relationships between ZeroFox and Looking Glass. We're customers of each other. There was some segments of the businesses have been traded back and forth over the years. So it wasn't as jarring, because a lot of people were familiar with the product suites. They were familiar with the available data and a lot of the people. So that helped. The next biggest step was just the size of ZeroFox, just the size of it. Very good culture at ZeroFox. Like, people love the technology. The majority of customers love ZeroFox and probably are still with them for a very good reason. Their digital risk protection is really top tier still. And so what was challenging was being the new guy and also introducing a complete new product suite into the company that sounded similar to digital risk protection, but it was more focused on infrastructure. And so being one of the only two people, in the product team who was available to teach and distill and, training sales teams and building marketing materials and working with the PMM folks, that was a speed run for me. And it was a speed run at a scale that I was, it took about 2 weeks to get used to that scale, right? Once you learn how many people, you got to have those calls where you're getting hammered by 20 SEs over one topic, right? At first it was frustrating, and then I realized, I'm not being clear enough. I'm not breaking these things down well enough. They have not ever heard of this acronym. Like, there's a million acronyms in our industry, and, people get really good at what they do and learning these ones. And here we are pitching a complete new thing that needs to be plugged into a platform that's existed for 10 years. And so that was culturally for me, getting to see what a developed go-to-market machine looked like. It was a speed run for business education in that. I'd been a product manager for a long time, but not at that scale, right? Like, not working with that many people, that many groups, that globally distributed, and the amount of things that they needed to be successful, the training and the webinars, all of it, meanwhile, trying to drive a roadmap and trying to do all the things that PMs do in their daily life, right? Scrapping for resources and, compromising with engineering teams. So it was all very good and very positive. Frightening at first, right? You get imposter syndrome really quick when you go from talking to 10, 15 people in a week to talking to 10, 15 people every hour, and all internally. And you kind of second guess yourself sometimes, especially when people kind of don't get it the first time you say it, or, you need to go back and revise your entire messaging. So yeah, it was a speed run. And it was well worth it. The thing about the move from Looking Glass to ZeroFox, like I mentioned, there was all those relationships already, and they already had a good reputation, right? The ZeroFox had a very good reputation what they do, and so trying to stick with that and also stay within a lot of their messaging and help that expand out was a really interesting venture, to say the least.
That's amazing. Quite good experiences in
Oh yeah,
just 4 years. Like doing PhDs, selling companies, getting new teams, growing fast. That's awesome. But everything changed last year. You took a new leap by founding Neon Cyber, a novel workforce security platform. And again, with Cody, how did it happen? What pushed you both to take the new leap a second time?
well, we started to see just in our own casual conversations and just hanging out and the trend of SaaS adoption, and what SaaS adoption looked like to us was very similar to what people have been trying to solve with attack surface management, right? It's an entire new set of hygiene and inventory. The combination of SaaS logins and on all the data that goes into it and the identities that drive behind it was frankly quite terrifying. And so we had really considered looking into different ways to harvest a lot of that data, how it could be used other than just doing some type of security detection and kicking out yet another alert. Like, how do we add as much context to an environment from the behaviors of users as possible? And that's where we came across, just calling Neon Cyber the workforce cybersecurity platform, because we are really focused on human identities, and we're really focused on the who, the what, the when, and the why of where they're going, the type of data that they're interacting with, the type of sites they're interacting with, whether it's SaaS apps, AI apps, and tracking them in those from a security standpoint, what they're interacting with, what type of forms are they interacting with, what's the behavior of the forms that they're interacting with. Phishing itself, we have the industry's first small language model that is built for phishing defense, and it's completely self-contained, and its sole job is to watch behavior and measure it against what phishing attacks look like in the wild versus what's benign behavior, what's malicious behavior, and making sure that we're sitting with the user as a security team, sitting with them and sort of bringing the security team to sit with them as they were, right? I think that we've made a lot of progress, with security education, security awareness training. It's impossible to educate everybody on every security threat all the time. Like, even the best security teams can't do that. And so being able to put the safeguards in with the user while also providing the security team with the observability and telemetry and control that they need, we know that it is where organizations need to be focusing on in the next few years, because inside of the browser, most people are working from the browser these days, and the sprawl of the logins and the applications and all the different authentication types is where people need to be focused on bringing that all in and keeping control of where their data is going in and out. We're past most companies hosting a lot of their own data, and now you have to worry about all of the third parties that you're relying on to safeguard your data, who, they're susceptible to the same security issues that everybody else is that are on the internet, and they're higher value targets because, they're aggregating a lot of people's data. So it's an interesting time, and it's a great space for us to get in and apply what we've learned, over the past 20 plus years together of just helping defend people, and really kind of also, back to my theory of, we need to help out the underdog, right? Like, the users are the vector these days, right? Like the last Microsoft report said that just in 2025 alone, identity attacks were the main vector. Compromised credentials are a gold mine for compromises these days. And, the state of the compromise is no longer just get into an organization and breach their systems, right? It's get the creds and then go to the SaaS app they have and then just extract all of the data. So it's very interesting. The human and non-human identity landscape is gaining a lot of momentum, and for the right reasons. It's where we're trusting people to interact with our data and be brokers of our data, and so we need to get around it.
That's fantastic. And also, you raised a pre-seed round led by Silverton Partners and came out of Stealth in September.
Yes.
Tell us a bit about the vision behind Neon Cyber. And let's cover a little bit about the features, the functionalities. You're working also with AI in this world that you early mentioned about what's happening there.
Yeah, so we partnered up with Silverton Partners out of Austin. They love Texas companies, and they also have a good cybersecurity background. And so we're very thankful that they wanted to join us on the journey to build out. And we've been building out about a year behind the scenes before talking to Silverton, building the agent and building the framework of everything we needed. And then called Loop Studio, and we needed to start, building a front end and putting in all the things together that users would expect. The goal of Neon Cyber is, we always say protect the people that power your business. That's the mantra, and it's pretty simple, right? We want to sit with the user. We want to provide the safeguards for the user as they interact with the outside world, and we want to be able to ensure that security teams have complete control, over a security event that could go on there, that they have the data that they need to respond accordingly, that they can put in policies that allow them that allow users to operate within the workflows that they want to do, while also not accidentally overstepping bounds. The users by nature are not nefarious people. That not every user is a huge inside threat, but again, back to we can't keep up with technology and attacks just from user training. Let's bring it in and aggregate it. Let's help organizations stay away from SaaS sprawl. Let's help curb phishing directly where it happens. Like I mentioned, we have our AI model for the browser that is anti-phishing, right? It's not reliant on email scanning, email gateways, threat intelligence feeds, right? It sits and helps the user make better decisions. And these are the little ways that we think that AI can be leveraged at a smaller level without having to just dump a lot of data into a language model and hope for the best. What are these 20 things that we expect to happen? And then putting that into the browser with the user and letting them go with it. Phishing has taken on a new life cycle. Attackers can afford infrastructure. They can afford to pay for things like DocuSign or Dropbox, where they'll skip over the first layer of traditional phishing contacts, right? And now they can do much better social engineering style attacks from inside of Dropbox, from inside DocuSign. We see it all the time. It just happened to a couple of very large companies last week where, valid infrastructure was leveraged. If you weren't very discerning and looking all the way under the hood inside of the browser as it's doing its thing, you wouldn't recognize that some of these really basic forms were nefarious redirects, and one bit of data is lost, and then they can just cobble the context together. And that's going to gain steam. I mentioned, I'm excited about AI, but I'm also terrified of AI because the grace at which it's going to enable social engineering attacks through voice and through video and through automated workflows. Like right now, there is a very popular attack called ClickFix, which is just trying to get, at the core of it, is just trying to get a user to put some stuff into their clipboard, open up a terminal, and then paste that information, right? And then out comes a PowerShell, and then we're off to the races. And that worked very, very good for them over the past year. And as defenders started to get wise to it, they found other ways to do it. They started doing videos, where you have to copy this and then adding a sense of urgency to it. It needs to be done in the next 15 minutes, and there's a timer going, and users are going to do it. And those are things that will sort of skip past like traditional visibility tools. The browsers, it's got TLS, and so that encryption, a lot of EDR tools can't see inside of it. You have to go through network reconstruction to do a lot of things if you're lucky enough to have that level of instrumentation. And so we're just going to start seeing users being driven to do more things based on things that look incredibly similar to real life. I spent a lot of time I worked at ZeroFox, and in a previous life, I worked at another fraud prevention company. And at the time, I was blown away then because how quickly attackers could spin up infrastructure that was pixel perfect to Bank of America. Like they had the branding, very similar way to domains, like all of it. And that shifted from the sophisticated, that was sophisticated at the time, right? And that was just stealing images and recreating a website. Now those can be generated in seconds, based on whatever scenario the attacker wants to put the targeted end user at. So while I am excited about AI, the way I see it being leveraged from an attacker standpoint, who have the ability to pay a lot of money to generate those campaigns is frightening. So we want to sit there with them. And outside of the phishing, we're very hyper focused on identity hygiene, right? Human identity hygiene. Who is logging into what with what type of authentication? Where can authentication be tightened up? What other logins are being used to access sites that may be not necessarily being used to skirt controls, but users are so savvy now that they want to build their own workflows quickly. They will put in API keys. They will be using AI wrappers, and they will have all of these logins going on to different sites. Whether or not they're corporate approved or not, it doesn't much matter to them because they have a job they're trying to do and they want to get it done in the manner in which they want. And so being able to add, full context visibility to that type of data is going to be super important going forward for a lot of people because the data sprawl is real. The identity sprawl is just gaining steam with every app. And we built another AI model to audit and review, we're trying to get every SaaS company on the planet and learn what's their data privacy policy, what is their sub-processor policy, their data reselling policy, all those things that you'll need to know so you can understand where people are going, where your data is resting, even if it was a trial account, what type of things were uploaded to it. So you can go back and, maybe remove that data or just inspect that vendor or ask people to not use that particular vendor and put in controls that don't allow it there.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And you're using AI to help your tool to be better. So that's amazing. So go about Neon Cyber is for what kind of companies is it for?
It's for anybody that uses a web browser. It's the easiest one. I think the most beneficial are companies that have security teams that need that visibility and control inside of the browser. They have blind spots, whether it's through XDR, EDR, their network visibility, and they understand that we're moving to a hybrid workforce. Customers or users are a lot more savvy about how they operate, and like I mentioned, adopting workflows. Folks that want to get ahead of that now, they want to start building that data corpus. They want to start building the policies around it. Any company that is concerned about phishing, also, these enterprises that have made a good investment in the traditional tools, but see the need to shift and follow the user, not just the point where the email is sent into the email gateways and scan, but what happens after the email? What happens after the click of the email if it wasn't picked up? And that's really sort of one of the best the orgs that get adopted. Security teams of all size. We've had really good success with 2-person security teams, and we have of course, we have a few customers that are larger, more mature organizations that have their own detection engineering pipelines. They have the full-blown stacks, and they're able to use our data to augment a lot of the context that they didn't have there, as well as using a lot of the security opinions that are derived from our. So it's kind of
Awesome.
a catch-all, right? Like anybody that has a browser needs to use this, but really security teams who understand the need for that visibility and that curation of the identities.
Yeah, that's impressive. But also, we are in a world that at least almost all companies need at least an advisor on security today. It's something that we need to invest on that.
Yeah.
So it is a competitive market out there. What sets Neon Cyber apart from its competitors?
It is a competitive marketplace out there, and we are glad to be in the arena with a lot of folks because they see the problem and they're attacking it in their own way. Our biggest differentiator is our phishing protection by far. Nobody is doing what we're doing inside of the browser with the autonomous review of phishing sites and phishing behaviors, and our ability to not just detect it and block it, but also provide full forensic timelines of everything that happened within there and how all of our security detections operate like that, to be able to drive that context back to the security teams to make sure that alerts are ready to go, ready to be reviewed, or they're ready to add context to a next layer of an investigation using the data. The second biggest one for me is our application catalog, because it sits and reviews where users are actually going, and it doesn't rely on any integrations. And a lot of the other SaaS cataloging tools and SaaS posture management tools, you have to have some type of fabric in place that is aware of your user directory, or it's aware of your SSO or your IDPs, and a lot of different ways to go in there where users may not be accessing sites through that direct route. We see all of the logins, we see all of the sites that they're going to, and we're able to aggregate that data in a much better and more accurate fashion. And we have, one of our customer has a very good rollout of a lot of different traditional SSPM tools, and we actually help add to that stack because of being outside of a lot of the integrations that they see. So we see a lot of, not to speak for them, but I don't want to call them shadow AI, but things that are adopted slowly and by only a handful of users and used repeatedly, but not at scale. And being able to, look into those further and to determine, what they want to do with that app and the data that's being transmitted back. back and forth between them. We have a few other ones that add up for me as well. Is just the ease of deployment. It takes 5 minutes to deploy us to 1 or 10,000 users. And that was one of the first things that we built, because having run operations teams myself and being on the buyer end, having to take weeks to just deploy and configure a tool to be ready can really be demoralizing to the team, and security teams don't have a lot of time these days at all. So the quicker you can get in and show them value, like how it would be impactful on day 1, day 7, day 15, day 30, and let them get going as quick as possible. That's a big advantage for us.
That's awesome. And we want the security teams working in the security, not just on response.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Want them working on hygiene. Want them armed as much as possible, as informed as possible.
Yes. Yes. So, and every product is evolving all the time. Tell us a little bit about the user experience and what can we expect from Neon Cyber in the coming months.
So we focused on making sure that our data was as approachable as possible in the front end. All of our data is available through our API. It's very rich and robust data, and we encourage our customers to access it from our API for augmentation of their workflows. We love it. We love seeing that. But in the front end, we focused on simplicity, right? Here's your workforce. Here's where everybody is working from a geographic location standpoint. Here is all of your operating, really, really fundamental things, right? Like Mark is logged in from 3 computers, these different browser types from these locations, and then expand that down. Well, who is Mark, right? I log in with my neoncyber.com email address. I also use my Gmail address to log into certain things. What are the sites that I'm going to? Do I have exposed credentials? Am I using the best authentication types and that we support? We either through programmatically or through policy, and understanding how I'm interacting with the world. And then drilling down further from that data set is taking that data and making, security informed decisions, right? With our different detections, compromised credentials, phishing, investigation into those types of things, to make sure that the full life cycle that we cover, who, what, when, and where of the entire workforce. And then wrapping that into the ability to just go through that data and understand it very simply without having to write complex queries, without having to do a bunch of things to understand who is in a deployment group. Click on one user card and you understand their behaviors and their issues, historically. And we've gotten a lot of good feedback from people who say they like the simplicity of the front end. And I was talking to Lou, our designer, about it, and she said that that's one of the best things that you can tell a designer, was that people understood the data quickly, they understood the workflows quickly. And so we'll keep focusing on, from a front end standpoint, making sure that the data is distilled down and organized in a way that's valuable as soon as you get into the page. We don't want people having to dig for value. We want them to understand their landscape very quickly. And on the back end, we're going to continue to grow a lot. We're working on some technology partnerships now that we're going to announce this month. One is with a very large SIEM vendor. One is with a breach-focused company to help us get a lot more information on corporate breaches. So not just at the identity level, but can we augment our application catalog with current events and things like that. And so bringing in a lot more ways to enhance the data from the data types that we already collect is a very big one for us. And we're really excited about it. And of course, continuing to expand our detection types and watching how attackers evolve their different tools and techniques and procedures, and making sure that we're covering those, making sure that what we put into place is applicable to the majority of those type of attacks. And that's really what's going to drive us in 2026, is sticking to the core mission of following the user and acting as a good guardrail for them, while arming security teams with the data that they need to make good decisions.
That's incredible. And what is Neon Cyber looking for now?
What are we looking for now? Well, we're a vendor, so we're always looking for customers. We're also always looking for people's opinions on what they're seeing in user adoption of technology and workflows. We're heavily interested in testing this latest round of AI browsers. We have our agent installed on all the new ones, and those are a black box, and I'm very concerned about people installing web browsers. That web browsers are already very generous in the data that they allow out for the user out to the web. We've built the web to become this marketing and SEO engine where everything's tracked. What's going to happen now that people are using browsers that are contained to where the data goes back and forth only between that particular AI company? What's actually going on? There hasn't been a lot of disclosure about what they've tacked onto Chromium to do a lot of their different AI conversations. So we'll be digging into those browsers a lot and understanding, is there ways that we can help tighten that up? Is there ways that we can help put some sanity in place there? Those are going to be pretty tricky. Those are going to be problematic for a lot of people, and attackers are going to learn very quickly how to manipulate those, whether it's through prompt injection or I don't want to speculate. It's going to be
Great. Mark, thank you so much for sharing with us today. Neon Cyber is incredible, and I will definitely be following your journey up close. I would like to ask one last question for
yes.
our entrepreneurs. And
Mhm.
if someone came to you tomorrow and said, I want to start my own cyber company, what you will tell them?
I would say do it without even knowing what their idea was, because I am a bad influence and an enabler. And I would always encourage people to chase down their dreams, right? And chase down the concept of building something that you believe in and enjoy, because there's not a lot of money in cybersecurity startups, regardless of what the industry tells you. And it's long and it's hard and it is arduous work. But you also, if you believe in what you're building, then that part is worthwhile. On the more responsible side, outside of just encouraging people to quit their jobs, I would say do as much research ahead of time. Validate your idea with yourself and some friends, but do as much research as you can on other companies who are even close within the radius of what you're doing. Even if it's only a handful of startups, you need to make sure that out of the gate you have something that's different from them, tangibly different. That is incredibly important. That has something we neglected in the past. At AlphaWave, we weren't prepared for that. We weren't prepared to suddenly be outgunned and outmanned by people who have taken tens, 20, 30, $40 million in funding when we had none. You learn very quickly that you may have superior technology, but superior messaging will win that fight. So understand the landscape before you make the leap, and understand who could bury you, right? Like that is a real thing. Companies can bury you with their marketing budgets very quickly. So believe in your technology, stick with it, quit your job, start the company. But before you quit, do that research. There's so many tools out now that can help you investigate within cybersecurity what all the different acronyms and all the different players in those realms, and find a little niche and attack it.
That's a really good advice. So I hope the entrepreneurs take it. Mark, thank you so much once again.
Well, thank you.
It's been a real pleasure having you here. For everyone in the audience, make sure to visit neocyber.com and connect with Mark and John on LinkedIn. NeoCyber is the work security platform to secure employees by protecting in-browser access to SaaS applications. So neocyber.com. Check it out. Thanks, Mark.
All right, thank you. Y'all have a good one.
Have a good one.